Good morning. Welcome to Mystery Book Club. I'm Sally Hanley, author of the Holly and Ivy Cozy Mystery Series, and I'm turning the program over to our author moderator, Peg Roach.
Thank you, Sally. The questions I printed out from David Weiden, the author's website. And he starts where I would start is, what did you think of the book? The first question, well, okay, it's a little bit more than that. What did you think about the setting of the book, the Rosebud Indian Reservation? If you've never visited a native reservation, were you surprised by anything in the book about reservation life?
Just how depressing it could be. There was hope in it, fortunately, or I wouldn't have been able to finish it because it was so bad in the middle.
Oh, what did you
You
find?
knew everything was going to go wrong. It was just awful.
What did you think was depressing about it? I mean, when you say
His limited choices, how everything seemed to be stacked against them. Law enforcement, everything seemed designed to push them down. But Marie and Lack, the chef, brought in hope. And I liked Virgil's attitude. You know, he was trying hard to get past what he'd been living with and through. It was just, but it did resolve itself.
When I first read it, what actually was shocking to me, the realization, you have this idea that, the reservations were bad, but I kind of, in my mind, thought of that being a thing of the past. So to read this book and to understand that this is what's going on now. So, for example, the last book we read was set back quite a few years ago, Killers of the Flower Moon. But this time, this book, when I read it, and I thought, oh my goodness, it was frustrating for these individuals. But, talk about what you said, Alice, the everything being stacked against them. So only the federal government could prosecute felonies, but like
They don't.
like sexual predators, sexual offenses, they didn't do anything about those because they weren't major felonies. And so what's left when there's no law? People take the law into their own hands, and that's what Virgil was hired to do, right? You realize, as you said again, few choices.
There was a Longmire book about the same occupation that Virgil had. An Indian from the Cheyenne Reservation was an enforcer. People hired him to pay back or get justice for people whom the law wouldn't do anything about.
Where was this?
In one of the Longmire books.
Oh, Longmire. Mm-hmm. What about George? I'm sorry. George, were you going to add to that?
No. The hopelessness, and I'll add to it. On one of my motorcycle rides, I went just a little ways into the reservation to a small town, and it was really small. And the first thing I noticed, they only sold regular gas. They didn't sell anything else. And I also noticed at least a half a dozen drunks laying against the street or the wall. When I was getting gas, very, very drunk female tottered up to my bike and wanted to know if I wanted a blowjob. It's just, I couldn't get out of there fast enough.
Where was this?
It was on the same reservation, the edge of it.
Oh,
Rosebud,
What?
Rosebud.
This was on the Rosebud Reservation.
Oh,
But Virgil, I really enjoyed Virgil. David put lots and lots of flaws into that man. And it just goes to show, vigilante is a bad man in my book, but just goes to show you that even a bad person can do good things, especially with his ward.
yes, I thought he was trying. And as occupations available to him,
Yeah.
he was needed. I mean, and he had already stopped drinking and straightened himself up enough. But he was, at least he was justified in what he was doing. I can see how.
I think we're going to agree to disagree on that point.
What would you do in those situations where there is no help, no law enforcement available to help you?
Well, if I was big and strong and tough like Virgil, I would probably do what was wrong and help out. It's like it's like war on the reservation in some ways, and all the rules are cast asunder.
Yeah.
Hear me now?
We can hear you, Patty,
Whoa.
and you can hear us.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Okay.
I was so looking forward to this. I was, okay.
did you want to add something, Patty?
Well, I couldn't hear what you were talking about.
Well, just what's your overall opinion of the book?
Oh God, I loved it, but I was really saddened by the fact that since it was written in 2020, the publishing date, that's still going on. And so I'm very saddened. And I also, I always give money to this Lakota Indian school. And I'm thinking, and it's run by, it's Catholic, and that's only one thing I give to every year, and I'm thinking, oh my God, it's awful. I mean, it's awful. And wow, it left me feeling really sad for those people.
Me too.
Yeah.
So
I like Virgil the best.
So my experience was primarily, we had several different rancherias or reservations up in Northern California. And, I felt like I could really picture this because they were generally sort of like prefab housing and poor. The presence of the tribal police was very pretty minimal. And what the tribes would do is contract with the local sheriff's department to, service the areas if they couldn't meet it. But yeah, I could definitely relate to what was what he was describing in the book. So a second question is, what did you think of the main character? We kind of already answered that. Virgil Wounded Horse, did you like or dislike him? Did you see a change in the book?
I think that, like one thing we didn't talk about with respect to him is the struggle. And I think we got a little bit of that in the last book we read as well, but the struggle to maintain the Indian way of life in the 21st century and how difficult it is, I guess, even to believe in goodness or believe in a God when you feel so downtrodden, when you feel so inhibited and oppressed by what's going on. And I mean, his whole story in this book is embracing the Indian ways, and it is, he struggles with that throughout the whole book, as it being like, that's the old way. We don't think that way anymore. There's no point in believing those things. But then he does have that spiritual experience that helps him to, I think the saying is like, may the creator guide you, right? Where, he reconnects with his cultural beliefs, and that also is redemption for him.
Add something to the Virgil. I liked him because it seemed like you followed a journey, because at first he was bullied as a child, and I think he did this job out of anger, out of retribution to his upbringing, and he denied his native culture. But then he became a good father figure to that Nathan, and then he also, was helping his people, and he also got back into the religion, the culture. But in the end of the book, he's still going to help his people, because that lady asked him. See, it was like a whole journey for me that I saw with him. It was very, very, very good writing. I loved it.
It was a circle. He
Right.
came back in the end to where he'd started, and what could he do? What could he do to help that woman?
That's in the next book. Right?
Is it?
I don't know.
I hope.
I hope so too. Is it out? Is that book out yet? Does anybody
I don't know.
I don't know.
Were there any characters that you didn't like?
Well, Ben Strongbear, or if that was his name, I knew from the beginning, I never believed him.
Mhm.
He had to have an ulterior motive. I didn't know what it was. But
Well, he was in politics, just remember that.
yeah,
Just saying.
that may be the same everywhere, any culture.
And at any point in history.
Yes.
I'll start over. Hi, I have a comment to make. One, my hearing aids are going in and out, so sometimes it's strange. But I have to admit, it's been a year since I read the book, so I'm a little off on the names. But the cop, the one who planted the marijuana in Nathan's locker.
Gov?
What was his name?
Was it Gov?
I don't know.
Yellowstone or Yellow Bear or something like that. But
Anyway,
Ben was behind it, Marie's father.
yes,
He had ordered it.
but still he carried it out. And if he
Yeah.
carried that out that easy, I'm sure there were other incidents in there that this particular character was a bad person who didn't do any good. He was just a jerk.
Yeah.
That was Ben,
You know,
Marie's father.
yeah. You know, and I was going to be a smart aleck and say, I thought his name was Darlene, but then Darlene would probably box my ears.
No.
No,
You
but
know, I think that it's terrifying to me. At Sisters in Crime last year, we had a policeman, the police chief from Lawrence, South Carolina. Patty, I think you were the one who recommended that we have him as a speaker, and he was magnificent. But he had been an undercover narcotics policeman earlier in his career. And, he truly felt that drugs were the biggest problem the country was facing. And if we didn't do something about it, things were never going to get better for us. But it does terrify me. Because in books that you read, or what you see on the news, how many people who are very respectable citizens, who are at the top of the social circle in their communities, are making money from the drug trade. And they're the same people up there speaking about law and order, and how, all these poor people are such a drag on the country, but in the meantime, they're the ones profiting from the drug trade. So yeah, it's what we saw in the last book, and it's what we see again in this book. And like I said, it's everywhere all the time.
Mm.
Yes.
I
So-
don't have the answer.
So
I don't-
he asked about changes in whether or not we feel that there should be changes in the criminal justice system. And we've already kind of talked about that. So he asks further, do you think the US government should change the laws to prevent Native nations from prosecuting felony crimes that occur on their own lands?
Absolutely. If a nation has if a nation has an adequate police force or contracts with, like Sally mentioned, a local sheriff's department, yes. But some of these smaller reservations, like the Caribbean in California, they're not big enough to support their own police force. And I know that they're anyway, a lot of the tribes are not big enough to support a police force.
Well, the police force, but also the judicial system.
That's true. That would be an even greater expense.
But it seems like there could be some kind of coordination, as such as they're doing with the tribal police and the sheriff or the police department, that coordinates that the law enforcement could also be worked out with the judicial. Because the system, the way the laws are set up now are paternalistic, just as they were in the Killers of the Flower Moon situation, where they were given guardians.
Mhm.
Sounds kind of like guardians again.
And apparently the tribal police, I don't know if it's the same in all reservations, but at least in this one, they didn't have the authority to do much of anything.
Right.
Right.
And so, and if the feds weren't going to enforce it, what were they supposed to do?
Yeah.
Just say, oh, well, another one.
Yeah.
That's
And
why
do
I
you
thought Virgil did a good thing.
Oh, all right. He did a good thing.
He filled a gap. There was a vacancy there, and he took care of it. In his way, it might not have been the best way, but it was what he could do.
Yeah.
The other thing is, do they, when you talk in jurisdiction, that's a very interesting subject. Because the laws weren't being enforced, especially to protect women, which totally, that got to me, because I've always been a law and order person, and women do need, rape and stuff like that, not being prosecuted.
And the
It just-
children,
The grain.
Yeah.
But do they really want police to come in? Do they, there's such a fine line when it comes to, especially if you wanted to set up something different, that would be difficult.
I don't know, because what choices do they have? Unless you change the law and they can enforce it, and maybe with grants or federal money, they could be supported enough to do what they could, what needed to be done. And there's always going to be corruption anywhere.
Yeah.
I don't understand why. okay, they have their own police, their own native police, but why has it always been that they have their own? I can't, couldn't they be part of like a a white person community and all live like together? You know what I'm saying? They've always been off to themselves. Why were they never segregated into the main part of our country? They're always off by them. They put them off in reservations. We didn't do that to the slaves. They, Black people have their own stuff and are, mingled with us. Why did they do that to the Native Americans? George, help.
What you're talking about is assimilation.
Right.
And assimilation was the destruction of many tribes. And most tribes had an area. They owned, let's say they owned Nebraska, all of that territory.
Okay.
It was owned by the tribe. And the members would, go and do things, build a home or camp or whatever. Well, the best way to destroy the tribal ownership was to make a law, which they did, that everybody, each Indian would be granted their own section of property. And that happened. So all of a sudden, Nebraska has thousands and thousands of these sections, each owned by an individual Indian. Two things that happened is, one, a lot of them got drunk and sold their property to a white man who took advantage of them. The other was, as part of this assimilation, the federal government came in and kidnapped the children and put them into these schools where they weren't allowed to speak their language. They were converted into red white men, and so they lost their path, and that's why there's smaller and smaller reservations. It's like with the Karuk, every time they get any sizable amount of money, they buy back some of their land. And so, I rambled here, but the federal government is the biggest problem and always has been.
They're corrupt. Just corrupt.
So there are other social issues discussed in winter counts. For example, the problematic healthcare system on reservations, the lack of healthy food options. What do you think about these issues?
I hope it's true that people like Marie and Black are trying to improve things, and maybe they'll catch on. I love the idea of turning the casino restaurants into real restaurants that served indigenous food or healthy food. Do you know if it's true, if it's happening in other places? Or was it just something that he thought of, Weiden?
Well, I think it's a good question. Are more and more Native Americans who, left and maybe went to colleges and are living in the cities and have lost touch, are they reconnecting with their culture and then going back and trying to do that? And that's a really good question. I'd be curious to know how many are trying to reconnect and then improve,
Yeah.
actually improve the current conditions by going back to their original roots and their original diets and their original beliefs. So it's an interesting question, and I'd like to know more about it myself.
I think on a lot of the reservations, the focus has turned to development of casinos. And the food in the casinos is not native.
Yeah.
basically regular, regular American fare, but a lot of the casinos too, a good part of the money that's made at the casinos is poured back into their communities. I mean, they've improved school system, and just in the, can only speak to the area that, well, the Karuks were up in that area, the Hoopa Reservation, and I forget what there's 2 or 3, there's about 4 different tribes that are up in that area. But they've improved schools. The United Indian Health System has a big complex up there, and the buildings contain a lot of the native art also, which is, nice to see. But so I think that in small areas, that's the only one I'm familiar with, but they have actually improved the living conditions for some of the tribes through how their money is managed. So,
About the Cherokee, we have one real close to us, the Cherokee casinos up in North Carolina. Have you been?
No,
Oh, it's real close. It's like a little more than an hour away. And I'm wondering, I've never been, but I've been up there to the Cherokee. They have like a all kind of stuff. They have their tribal, their tribal, what they, they make stuff, and they show you some of their crafts. They show you their, what do you call their, their dances and stuff like that. I used to take kids up there when I taught school for a field trip. And it was very interesting. They dressed in their cultural dress, and it was very interesting. But I'm wondering if that casino, which is now about 10 years old, helped those people. That'd be interesting for me to find out, I think.
yeah,
We should take a trip up there.
yeah.
In William Kent Kruger's books, the casinos do pour money back into healthcare and education. I don't know anything about their cultural encouraging that, but there's a lot about what the casinos are doing with their money in his books. In Minnesota with the Ashkenazi. No, that's not it. That's Jewish. Anishinaabe or something. I can't remember the word.
That's in the news, so.
Anastasi.
Yeah,
No,
that sounds like it.
They call them Shinab for short. It's Anishinaabe or something. I couldn't say it anyway, so. But they did a lot there, and I hope it's indicative of other places.
The casinos, and I haven't been there, but I'm on the chat. And Crooks built a casino, probably, I don't know, 10 years, 15 years ago. And it's a big expense. And the tribal officers are reinvesting in it. They're, like building a motel and increasing the parking lot, stuff like that, which eventually will bring back to the tribe, but these are expensive costs. However, within the tribe, and I think, within the tribe, and there is a complete, this what direct message chat room about it, and the topic is, why don't you give us some money instead of investing it for the tribe? So the individual people, are saying, give me money. And the tribe is saying, we're making things better, like the health care center, a dental center, and things like that.
And
But
they're creating jobs.
yes. So, there's a struggle within our tribe and I'm sure it's similar in other tribes. I know that there's a tribal casino near Roseville that has been around long enough and is big enough that they're pumping out money to the tribal members. But it takes a long time to get there.
Do you think it helps?
If I got a check every month, it'd probably help.
Yeah,
But I'm more in favor of reinvesting in buying land.
Ah,
too.
I think there is that contrast between, because some of the tribes do get that, I don't know whether, I didn't think of it as monthly, as an annual payout that they get, reparations, I think. And rather than that, the proposal is for some of the tribes, rather than people getting that individual payment, that it should be for the tribal leadership to find a way of making things better for the tribe in general.
And you know, that's a good point, because in this story, I didn't see there wasn't any good leadership as far as, you know, governing and that kind of thing. So that's then everything falls apart beneath it.
And I
Yeah.
think that, and it still comes back to, I mean, the tribes are people, and people in any culture, you're gonna have the good ones and the not so good ones, and the good leadership and the not so good leadership. So what
Yeah.
works in one situation isn't gonna necessarily work for another by virtue of who's in charge. So, no,
it raises an interesting question, doesn't it? It's kind of like maybe the people who ask for the money being given directly to them, for them to make up their minds how they want to spend it, as opposed to, you know, the leadership. Now, again, if the leaders are good, yeah, great. They're going to be making decisions in the best interest of the community, right? But, you know, who takes after once they move on and the next group comes in, and then all of a sudden they're not making the decisions. So yeah, why wouldn't I give me a couple of $100 a month and let me decide whether I want to spend it on books or healthcare or whatever. So it's an interesting question, right? It's an age-old dilemma.
and I think there have been a number of cases about mismanagement of funds in the tribes.
Anyway,
Anyway, there's a lot of money.
Anywhere.
Especially if you're dealing with people who are not well educated and who are already so far down by pushed down by the system. Will they make very good decisions in their leadership? And, you know, it's difficult. I don't know, because many of them would vote for someone who said, well, I'm going to give the money back to you. Not caring what they did with it. I don't know how you educate people to take care of their own problems and selves.
We can't do that.
No, we haven't done it as a whole. So.
How did you feel about the relationship between Virgil and Marie? And how about Virgil and his nephew over the course of the novel?
They made the book worth reading.
Virgil and Marie, or Virgil and Nathan?
Yeah, that's what gave me hope. It was so depressing, the other parts of it, that's how I was able to keep reading it. And I liked their relationship. I liked what it did for Virgil. Having his nephew to take care of it made him look at things and think more.
Yeah.
How did you feel about the conclusion of the novel?
He had come a long way. And I was glad to see him become part of take up his heritage again. And it was kind of swift, but it worked. And I needed a happy ending.
Well, I
And it
thought it was pretty exciting too at the end, before, before it was finalized, but
Yeah, it was very suspenseful, the build up to that, the final confrontation. But, it was good to see the villain get what he deserved. But it was, you could just understand how difficult it was for the daughter, you know? How do you, yeah, it was pretty powerful.
I
How,
don't, and I don't think he gave us too much indication that Ben was off. I mean, there was that suggestion, but until it came right down to the end.
I always thought he was off. I didn't know how far off, but that was what worried me from the very beginning. There's something wrong with that guy.
and I mean, that's one of the greatest things about how the author dealt with the story, because he could have made the villain somebody outside of the reservation, right? But he didn't. It was very real that there are, criminals within who have everybody fooled, and they're the ones that are taking the most advantage of their own people, as long as they take care of their own family, which is not Indian culture at all.
No, I thought the forgiveness as being part of the Lakota way was heartwarming. Maybe not always practical or in their best interest even, except spiritually. I can see why it would help them spiritually, but didn't get the results that you might always want.
If
Sorry, George, go ahead.
making Ben within the tribe, the villain, I thought was good for another reason. Because if you always blame the white man on the outside, then all of a sudden it's just cliche. And the book would never have had the power that it does if they, did blame somebody on the outside.
Yeah,
Oh, woe is me. It's always that bad white man. Well, it's not always the bad white man.
yeah.
As it was in Killers of the Flower Moon. So
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, but that was not, there was no way in the world you could make that a cliche. That was, whoa.
did anything in the book surprise you? And what did you like most? What were your favorite scenes?
I like Marie's cooking, the way she got Virgil to try things, and he found that actually they were good. And he gradually moved over to her thinking. I really liked that part.
It was interesting because for a little bit there, I can't recall the names either, George, because I read this quite a while ago. The fellow who was the cook, bringing back the one behind the movement for bringing indigenous food back into the
Black. Yeah.
okay, Lack.
LACK.
Lack. Okay. A little bit, you were a little suspicious of him for a little while in the book. So that was a surprise to me when he turned out to be like, a totally upright character, and not at all, he didn't have ulterior motives. He really was who he said he was. He really believed in what he was doing, and he had the best interests of everyone. So that was a little bit of a surprise. I don't know if anybody else felt suspicious of him at any point, but see, Virgil was suspicious because of his relationship with his girlfriend. So I kind of was seeing it through his eyes. But yeah, I like, I like that relationship and those characters very much.
I thought some of the scenes between Virgil and Nathan were really nice. Nathan was, I guess, a typical teenager, keeping it to himself. He doesn't want to tell, doesn't want to talk about it, but Virgil kept trying to just be there for him. It was nice.
I kind of like the transformation in his friend Tommy, who was
Yeah.
kept, who became Lack's assistant. So,
And found out he really loved cooking and,
yeah.
and was going into it. Saved him.
So. Patty, I don't know if you were trying to talk, but were you wanting to say something?
Your
We can't
sound's
hear
gone
you.
again.
Can't
Yeah.
hear you.
We can't hear you. You're not muted, so it's something to do with your volume.
Or your microphone. So second to the last questions. If Winter Counts was turned into a television series or film, which actors would you like to play Virgil and Marie? These are David's questions. So
Ah,
I don't know if they're thinking about making it into one or not, but
What was that guy in? There is an Indian actor he could play the part. He's good and he's big enough to to be Virgil. I like what's his name? Zahn McLaren, but he's just not Virgil. But this guy's younger. I could find his name.
And Wes Studi would be great as Ben.
Yes, he would.
Yeah.
He's good. And then, if George Means is still around acting, he could be Jerome, the medicine man or the spiritual guy, the old one. I've forgotten what exactly he did, but he's the one that had the ceremonies that Virgil went to and became got back into it through him. I like,
the Sweat Lodge.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't know how to pronounce the names.
I really liked the scene that he used the massacre to discover the clues and bring forth things that happen that we should always remember that should never
Wounded
happen.
Knee. Yeah, I read that book years ago, Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee.
And then his last question was, what aspect of Native American life would you like to learn more about?
All of it.
I was going to say, I think we've kind of covered a lot of.
I'd like to know a lot more about, their religious beliefs. And I use the word, I say religious, but that's not what I mean. It's a spiritual belief. It's I'm working on a Celtic fantasy, and like I'm reading about the Druids, right? And there's very much in common, I think, with their total identification with the land. And there was a god for the moon and a goddess for the moon, and the goddesses of the forest, and I very much admire and am drawn to these beliefs that are very closely tied to nature.
Yeah.
And the idea that, God is in everything. It's that's the spirit, the guiding spirit is in everything around us, especially in nature. And the fact that we're destroying our planet is very much due to the fact that we are no longer connected to nature. I could still remember I had a garden, and I picked a green pepper and I gave it to this young woman, and she looked at it and she goes, "Oh, wow, just like in the store." The irony of the fact that, seeing something picked off a plant and handed to you and thinking, "Oh yeah, that's like what I get at the store," and not connecting the other way around. We're completely out of touch with the natural world, and that's why our environment is in the condition that it's in. But that's just so I would like to learn more about the Indian beliefs, because I think there's a great tie-in between Indian and Celtic cultures.
That's one of the things I love about William Kent Kruger's books.
Mm-hmm.
Henry Miller, or however that's pronounced. I love the parts that he's in with his beliefs and
Right.
he does. So I think Kruger's done a great deal of research and seems very close to it. I assume he's accurate in his portrayal of things.
He writes beautifully.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh, yes.
Yeah.
So.
He's
one of my favorites.
Yeah, I've read everything so far. I wish he'd write faster. But
So much to read, so little time.
yes.
That's the end of his questions, so.
Well, I'm glad we read this book.
Yeah.
Even though the first half of it, I was really depressed with it. But it picked up when Virgil started to see things and do better.
Yeah, it really was. It's an excellent book. Well
Yeah.
written,
And so
good
so
story.
good job with suspense and creating his characters, and I really liked it. That part.
So before we log off, Peg, you want to give us a little blurb about next month's book?
Oh, so the South Spit Murders is basically set on the north coast of California. It's thank you, George. My main character is a nurse who's gone back and is now a detective with the sheriff's department up in that area. And so it's basically looking at characters within a small town, and it's a murder mystery. So
I'm looking forward to it.
so I don't have any questions, so you'll have to have questions for me.
Well, I have to say, I love talking about this character because I identify with her, not in her detective and nursing capacity, but in her relationships in life. See, there are some really, I enjoyed reading it very much. So happy Valentine's Day, everybody.
Oh, yes. Happy Valentine's Day,
Okay.
Mel.
This has been fun. Thank you.
Hope
See
you,
What's going on?
hope you all get yourself flowers.
Oh,
Already got
see you next time.
Okay, see you next month.
All right.
Bye-bye. Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
enjoyed it.